Welcome, Slash. How are you?
I'm good.
So great to see you. I know these stomping grounds are like family for you,
Yeah.
coming up.
Seriously, I've been here for a long time.
Wow. Well, take us back a little bit to those early days, because I know growing up, born in England, but growing up in, Fairfax
In
and
LA, yeah.
Melrose. What are your greatest memories about, that era, that 70s, around Melrose in LA?
I was basically my first years in LA were up in Laurel Canyon, and that was 1970, 71, and that's when it was like the mecca of creativity up there at the time.
Some music coming out of homes
Mitchell
everywhere.
there, and that's why I first met David Geffen and
Yeah.
Linda Ronstadt and some of the guys from the Eagles, and all these different people were up there, and it was just really amazing. Jim Morrison and those guys. It was that period, and it was really exciting. So that was my favorite sort of thing about moving to Los Angeles, and then sort of made my way down to like Sunset and Doheny and the whole sort of Sunset Strip kind of vibe. Just saw a lot of concerts with my parents. Went to a lot of shows, and was raised in a very musical environment. So I met a lot of pretty famous artists back then, and I have no real complaints about the whole
So
thing.
parents had a nice record collection. You could.
Well, my parents were in the
dig in.
business.
Yeah.
So we had an amazing record collection, and we had records coming in all the time, and it was a very eclectic musical environment from blues and jazz to upwards of heavy metal and everything in between, folk music, and a lot of hard rock and all that.
Yeah. Do you remember the first record you really fell in love with? It really specifically you could kind of remember?
Well, I was still in England when it was because my dad's a hardcore rock guy from that generation. I mean, he sort of grew up with music as it was coming up in real time. So he's like 70, mid-70s now. So he was that same age as all the other guys from art school that were coming out starting bands. But his favorite band at the time was The Who, which turned into my favorite band because they were just the most high energy. And I want to say Who by numbers, but I can't remember for sure if that was the first one that I fell in love with.
Okay, great. And growing up right there, little did you know, Melrose and Fairfax is such a, epicenter. You got the Starwood right up the street, and of course Sunset Strip.
I used to do roadie gigs at the Starwood and at the Whiskey.
Is that right?
Honorary roadie kind of thing for free beer.
Wow, amazing time. So I know you started basically playing music, I guess, in school. You kind of took some lessons and kind of
something like
found
that.
Found your way to a guitar.
I got turned on to the guitar by Steve Adler, who played in Guns N' Roses, and we met when we were about 14, and we got to be really, really good friends, and that was during the summertime. And I remember I turned 15 that summer, and I went over to his house, and he had an electric guitar, and he had some crappy little amp and a Kiss record, Kiss Alive too. And he just turned all that shit on and on the guitar, and it was really exciting. And I never aspired to be a musician up until that point, and then suddenly I wanted to play guitar. So I thought I'd take lessons at this local music school by this guy named Robert Wolin was his name. Amazing, still to this day one of the best guitar players I ever met. And I watched him learn how to play solos that I wanted to learn off a record right in front of me. I said, fuck, I can do that. And so I started doing it at home that way.
Sure. Well, I know some of the early groups, you formed Road Crew, interesting enough, named after a Motorhead song.
Yeah, it was named after the Motorhead song off the Ace of Spades record.
That's amazing. Now, you came through Black Sheep, and then you met, obviously with Steven, Izzy and Axel and Duff. Do you remember that first rehearsal, like feeling the magic that something was clicking?
Well, we had different incarnations of Duff was in Road Crew at one point when he first moved out to Seattle, as well as Steve. And then I was in a band with Axel and Steven for Hollywood Rose prior to Guns N' Roses. But once the lineup that we all know and love came together, we had a rehearsal in a little studio in Silver Lake. And it was just that instantaneous bond that we had from the get-go. It's hard to really verbally explain.
Yeah.
And then we took that, and I remember we had a gig at the Troubadour, and then we hitchhiked Seattle.
The famous
and played
Seattle
over there.
gig.
And that just really just bonded us all together. But we had a like-mindedness between the five of us that we couldn't have been found with any different combination of us. And you know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't there for just Axel and Steven and I. It wasn't there for Axel Duff and Izzy with Tracy or whatever. This was like this combo that just was specifically magic, you know.
Yeah, it was amazing. So I know it was quite a roller coaster ride, even though, you know, Appetite for Destruction took a while to take off. But once it did, you know, with the MTV and, of course, Paradise City and Welcome to the Jungle, it's quite a roller coaster ride for you. What were your greatest memories of that period of, you know, seeing Appetite take off?
Really, well, during the actual sort of launch period, I guess you call it, we were touring with Aerosmith.
Yeah.
That's when it really took off, and it was just great working with one of my all-time favorite bands, and just that combo out on the road in the summertime, you know. And people actually showing up early to see us play. I think that was the first sort of inclination that we were, you know, sort of arriving, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember you telling the story about falling in love with the Rocks album, hanging out with a girl, and the album was more important than the girl at that point.
I listened to it like front to back 2 or 3 times while she was sort of waiting on the couch for me to make my next move, and I just moved over to the stereo, and that was it. And eventually she said, well, I guess it's time for you to go.
Wow, and just touring again with Aerosmith recently, and it's been like coming full circle.
It was really, really great too, because you know, I've been friends with those guys ever since 1989 or 88 when we toured together the first time. And it was just something about playing with them this time around that I really got to appreciate them on a different level than I had before. I haven't really thought about sort of exactly what all those things are, but they're just such a great fucking rock and roll band, and they're so, you know, it's basically very simple arrangement, you know, 2 guitars and a bass and drums and vocals, and bands have gotten so far away from that over the years to see a band sound that good without any bells or whistles, you know. AC/DC is another one, but Aerosmith is to actually play with these guys and see that. It was encouraging, because that's all we do, and nobody else in sort of like our contemporary peers, you know, are doing that. They're all just sort of taping and looping and doing this, that, and the other, and using a lot of sound effects and so on. And so it was very encouraging, and made me feel very strongly about sticking to my guns, you know.
Yeah, and being an American band too. I mean, it's the pride of Boston and America here. Now, I know going through all those years of the big record companies and all that, and you were probably just focused on playing and hoping that the business was handled, but now you've achieved so much great independence. You know, besides now headlining on your own with your own band, you know, you run your own label in a sense. You can put out your music how you want, when you want. You got the new Live Roxy out, you know, and great 3 records in the can. And now you're making movies. What does that independence mean to basically kind of be in charge of being able to bring that creativity out to your fans, unfiltered, undiluted, really the pure stuff?
It was pretty gratifying, you know. I mean, I don't have anybody sort of standing over my shoulder telling me, you know, what I can and can't do. And you go through, I mean, I think I've paid my dues with that, you know, over the years. So it's nice to be able to just pick something that you want to do, be it making a record or making a movie, and then just going after it and just, you know, seeing it through, pursuing it into its fruition kind of thing. I think I've always been like that, but being sort of more in control of my own destiny at this point, and not having a lot of partners that I have to work in tandem with. It's something that I can do things at my own pace, which is usually as frenetic as possible, and just keeps things going at the rate that I like to be able to do it.
And how special is that to be able to kind of capture a live concert at the Roxy, and you know, the little club tour you did with the Troubadour, and you know, kind of paying homage in a sense of where you came from?
It was a lot of fun. It was 4 shows, one in New York at Sancho's Party House, I think, or something like that. I'd never played there before, but tiny little place.
Yeah.
And then the Troubadour and the Whiskey and the Roxy, and it's just like one of those things where it's bare bones, even to the point where you're really just a club band anyway, and having the house sold out and that sort of energy, that intensity that happens between a crowd and a club and a band on stage, and that give and take that goes on. But also just playing, at the Roxy, which was back in the day, back in the mid '80s, that was sort of the pinnacle of the venues in Los Angeles, in West Hollywood, to be able to play headline at the Roxy on a weekend, So to go back and do that and bring some cameras and sort of try and capture that vibe. And then also, playing at the Whiskey and doing the same thing there. But it was especially, something about playing at the Troubadour for the first time in, I guess it's been like 30 years. And being in that room that I grew up in even before Guns N' Roses got together, because I used to go there and see Linda Ronstadt and Helen Reddy and Sam Croce and all these people when I was a kid. So it was really special to get into that room and play that venue.
Yeah, of course, Elton John, Springsteen, everybody played the Troubadour. Yeah. Kiss,
Did Kiss play the Troubadour?
Kiss played the Troubadour, yeah. Amazing stuff. So now what advice do you give to the young creative people? Because in this internet age, a lot of these kids kind of think you can, bypass this and get the shortcut to success, whether it be playing guitar, being a rock star, or, making a movie. And, the technology has allowed us to do things, but there's no shortcut for, mastering your craft.
Right.
So what do you tell the younger generation as far as not worrying so much about trying to get a record deal, but really perfect your songcraft, or perfect your playing,
I know the method of thinking that record deals at this particular point in time aren't really where you want to be at.
Why give away your rights before you even start?
Yeah, in music, whatever style of music it is, the most important thing to do is really to know and love your music, really be into it because of the passion for music, and be able to want to play it and want to write and want to be able to do these things musically. Should be the first and foremost priority. So it means a lot of really, really hard work, dedication, commitment, sacrifice, and the time that you put into practicing and learning your instrument. That should be of paramount importance. It's like taking the shortcut and learning how to get equipment to do it for you. I've never signed on for that one. And then how you're going to navigate the business is something that comes later. If you want to get your music to people, then you can start to look at the playing field and see how you're going to go about doing that. The model's changed so much since I first started. But then there's a lot of cool avenues that you can take on the internet and so on to be able to expose yourself. But I think that expose your music, not yourself. Yeah. But I think the first priority should be about the music.
Yeah. Well, you got to be a master of your craft. You got to be a student of the game to get anywhere. And I'm sure you agree there are no shortcuts. So dedication, patience, sacrifice, very important.
For me, I put a lot of hours into it, going into my first bands and all that, and then Guns N' Roses, we sort of cut our teeth on the club circuit and did that for a long time before we actually got signed, and then there was that period of not knowing. I don't even think we really cared how successful it was going to be. And then when it happened, it was like, obviously it was great, a feeling of accomplishment and so on. And then after the fact, I had to start all over again, basically. I had the name that was established, but that didn't open as many doors for me as you'd think. And having to do it all again. And when we were talking about the Aerosmith tour, one of the things that was really special about it was appreciating having gone from this sort of obscure place in 2010 to finally getting to a place where we're playing with one of my favorite bands, and actually drawing people into the house before the show. And then, so that whole process is sort of called the chase, is something that is really worth going through. You don't want to sort of bypass all that.